Awesome. Well, let's jump into it. So, with it being the new year, with us being in that spot where it's, hey, what's next? Where are we at? And how do we kind of get to that next level? We're starting it off with saying, okay, what are 7 things to start your year off right? To start this year, right? What are those 7 things that if you do, then this year will be different than next? And this is where it's, kind of fun to talk about and jump in and go from there. But this one I'm really excited for. The first one, I think it makes sense. I think a lot of you have read, Start with Why. A lot of you have read books about why are you doing this, right? This first one is get clear on what your one thing is, right? I talk with a lot of you in our coaching and different things like that. And there's a million ideas out there that you can latch onto and say, hey, I want to now do this. No, I'm now going to become an expert here. Now I'm going to do, right? It's very common. We all love the shiny object syndrome. Like it's a thing, right? So getting clear on what your one thing is. So kind of going into this, like if you listen to really there's so many out there, but like if you listen to like Tony Robbins, for example, he'll talk about where you put your attention is where you're going to get those results, right? Progress requires focus. So going through and putting that effort in the attention and the focus in the spots that are going to give you the best. Having it so that, instead of doing scattered work of running around everywhere and just being busy for this whole year, having it so that you focus on what really matters, right? One activity disproportionately drives outcomes. So if you focus on what's that one activity and do that at a higher level, more focused, more attention to it, you're going to have a better outcome in that, right? Going back to the podcast that dropped that was about farming, he said the number one thing that agents do wrong with farming is they don't do it long enough, right? They commit, they say, hey, great, I'm going to do this. They spend it for the 2 months or 3 months or whatever, and then they might get a result or they might not, and they stop. He said that really it takes about 1.5 years of doing farming to even start getting real results from it. You're going to get some before that, but to really start making that impact and difference, it takes that time, right? For him, and this is why I love the MREA podcast so much, is because it dives into what their one thing is, right? If you ever look at that, like I just did a YouTube video recently, and I called it the 1+ rule. Like your one thing should be your SOI, and then you need what is your thing that you're really good at on top of that, right? If you're really good at open houses, if you're really good at farming, if you're really good, like what is that thing that you're really good at on top of taking care of your people, right? So this is it, right? When the one thing is protected, momentum builds naturally. Everything else becomes easier or more efficient. That's a line from the one thing, right? What's the one thing that by doing such, everything else will become easier or unnecessary? That's the refining question. If you've read the one thing, it is the question that says, hey, what is that thing that's going to help me get there, right? Okay, because the reality is, we know this from Bold, clarity is power. The more clear and the more you know what you're going to work on, the more power is in that and going to help you get where you want. It's the reason why I know I was talking with some people about the retreat already, right? Having that clarity of what they want their life to look like in a year, naturally, even without putting maybe enough effort into certain spots, they got more results on all of those aspects than they were planning, right? If they didn't plan. Okay, so ask yourself this question. If this year feels different by June, what will you be doing differently most weeks? Because here's the reality. My business grows when I consistently what? So these are those focusing questions that I want you to think about and say, what is that one thing? What is my why of what I'm going into to help make it so that this is going to be, your next growth year? I've seen a lot of your numbers of, 140% growth, 60% growth. Like there's some really cool ones of saying, great, what what did this last year of 25 look like? I think that 26 is going to be a great spot to keep on digging in, keep on pushing to make it so that you guys can get that next growth of that next level. Okay, number 2. So number 2, it's fun because we talked about this a lot, getting into the new year of saying, what's the plan? What's your numbers? But this is where you need to rebuild if you don't have it, or if you forgot it, or re-examine your economic model, right? In the MREA, there's 4 models. One of them is the economic model. This is the model about knowing your numbers. So in one of the bold truths is the path is in the math, right? Everything in life has some form of math, some form of number attached to it. So this is where I say, hey, if you know your one thing and what it's going to take you to get there, you now need to know the numbers that are going to get you to where you need to go. Because you can track that, right? When I'm having a lot of conversations with you guys, I say, hey, great, how many conversations have you had, right? That's the last one of that metric to say, hey, great, are you doing what you said you're going to or said you wanted to in order to get the result? So this right here is going to be that, because motivation follows math, not hope, right? Having those numbers, knowing how many people you need to talk to, what does that look like, is that important part. Because the reality is you don't rise to your goals, you fall to the level of your clarity. So if you guys don't know where you're going, the other quote that's very similar to this is you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems, right? This is one of my other favorite ones. If you guys have the numbers and everything that you know that you need to hit, then you can now wake up every day and say, hey, if I have to call 10 people, you can get done calling 10 people in an hour and a half and have 10 conversations with people. And then if that's all you did that day, in my opinion, you probably won, right? Because everything else kind of goes from there. So knowing this, we have 2 parts in here for you. One, I know I've given it to you before. It's in hot links as well. But we have the economic model worksheet if you want to do it by hand. You also can talk to your friend AI, and he has the whole thing all built out for you. He asks you questions, and he'll rebuild it for you if you don't remember what those are. So I wanted to make sure you had that, use that, go through it again if you need to. It's going to help you know what are those numbers, because I want you to be able to, in your head, know how many people do you have to talk to a day, and everything else will come together, right? That's the first metric on this whole scale of things. Okay, this goes into this part. And if you know your number, you know what you're needing to accomplish, this next one is very vital. And I'm excited because next week we're having a panel of some of our top agents who are showing and talking about and answering questions about their weekly rhythm, right? Because I want you to see what they do, because everybody is different. So that's going to be the fun part of having those questions and go through this. But locking in your weekly rhythm is going to be very much of, okay, what's on your schedule, time blocking, and making sure that you can kind of go through that process. So to kind of dive into this one for a second, there's really, in business, there's 3 big areas. You have your lead gen block that should be on your schedule. You probably need a little bit of your admin block, because this gives you order and clarity and knowing where you're going. This would be a great time to review your 411 if you have one, or your GPS, any of those tools that we've given you over time at Keller Williams to build your business plan. And then I love this one. Like, do you on your schedule have some growth block? Have it where you have time that you're reading. Have it where you have time where you're saying your affirmations. Those kind of things on your schedule. Garrett, one of my favorite quotes, and I've been saying it for years from Gary Keller, is if you erase it, replace it. So he was very much, if you have to erase something and something comes into your schedule and all of a sudden you couldn't do lead gen at X, Y, and Z time because you let somebody else take over that time, it's the reality, right? Then if you have to erase it, then where do you replace it on your schedule? Because if it started on your schedule because it's something that was important, then yeah, you should figure out where does it go to make it so that you're in that spot, right? Around this is where, okay, when you go look at what a lot of top performing agents do, this is kind of a very rough outline, and this can be edited so many ways. But I wanted to start here. Reality is, okay, if you have your first block time of saying reviewing your 411, right? Having it so that you have that time for that growth, that knowing where you're going, then having your lead gen, your lead follow-up, and lunch. I miss that appointment too often. Right? But having it so that, okay, great, you have that time in there, and then after that, it should all be appointments, right? This schedule can be done in so many ways, though. I've seen it, and I've had MAPS coaches who their whole methodology was about having theme days. So having it so if I have SOI as Monday, then my whole Monday is talking to all the SOI that I should be that day, enjoying that, going from there. Maybe Tuesday is your follow-up day. So my whole morning lead gen is all follow-up that day. I'm looking at every single lead I have. I'm doing all of that. I'm going through and that's what I do that day, right? Maybe Wednesday is my social media day. So that's the day that I get all my social media for the next week ready, and I'm getting ready for, does that kind of make sense? That's another way that I've seen this done really well. I've also seen it where, a lot of you have done a great job of having open houses on your schedule at different times and having that be your mobile office. And that's your time to also get your lead gen in while you're at a spot that someone can show up, right? But I love this quote from Mark King. So if you're not telling your time where to go, you are going to wonder where it went, right? This is the book I'm actually reading right now. I've been diving into it, The 5 Types of Wealth. Highly recommend it. It's been a really fun read, a really fun one to go into. It goes into time, social, mental, physical, and financial, because those are really the 5 types of wealth. And he dives in why and his stories and experiences. And really cool in that way of saying, hey, great, where are you at? He has a whole section about time blocking is why I was thinking about it. And he was going through just the whole methodology around that. And I like some of these questions that were in there, but it's like, what does my calendar say I value right now? So if you were going to show your partner sitting next to you what your calendar looks like, and if that reflected what you wanted your business to look like, right? Where am I leaking high energy hours? Was a concept that was in there. What block, if protected daily, would change everything? If this week repeated for 10 years, who would I become? Right? Thinking enough in the future and kind of going from there. So I was thinking through it and going, really, how often are you not only planning something, but then also setting up planning time to reflect on how you've done? There's a really awesome book. It's called, I just blanked on it. In the title, it's like stupid or something like that. It's all about it's on my bookcase, but it's having thinking time, basically. Well, I can't think of what it's called. I just totally froze. Yeah, it is. But yeah, it's great. But ultimately, the book is very much about how, if we actually take the time to think about what we are going to do or did and self-reflect, how many mistakes we'd actually avoid, right? And the whole book goes through that. I'll have to look at what it was called at some point in time and give that to you guys. The Road Less Stupid. Thank you. I knew it was in there. Awesome book. Great one. If you want to kind of go into that, really good one about just making sure you're having that thinking time is really the theme of the book when you boil it down. But really good about setting it up, having that reflecting time. How are you doing? Some of my coaches, one of their favorite activities to have me do is to print out what last week looked like and then highlight it in the different categories and also say how well I did during those times that I time blocked. Right? To have that time to reflect. It's not easy, right? Because, but that's a lot of times what they've held me to and kind of gone from there. So, what goes on your calendar before life gets a vote? Right? A lot of you who went to the retreat, I said that the first thing you should put on your calendar, and that's why I have these. So if any of you want a full year calendar, you're welcome to have that after, right? Is to block out your fun time. I know. Some of you don't know what it means. I know, right? But block out your fun time. That should be the first thing that you're going through and saying, hey, when am I going? When am I on vacation? Have it already on your calendar for the whole year, right? Plan that time in ahead so that you'll actually do it and hold yourself to it, right? But what gets a vote before life gets a vote, right? Because the reality is, who could wake up, show up to the office, or show up and have something come up that they need to do? Right? It's the reality. Like, there's going to be things that you need to do in some form or fashion, right? So what does that look like? How do you plan before that comes up? Okay. Number 4, decide what you're not doing this year. Very similar. This is deciding what you're not doing. Some of you are very much yes people, right? You love, right? You love saying yes to everything, and you don't protect your own time for what you said you're going to do, right? Which this is a skill to learn, right? So what we're going in, because this is where it's fun, because you now get to have growth through subtraction. What are the things that are in your life that you need to be saying no to, creating a barrier around, having it so you have a process to make it happen, right? I am very much, this is one that I struggle with a lot, because I'm very much someone who loves to help everyone and anyone right away. I'll admit that. It also, I've realized, because I've had enough coaches tell me, that if I'm busy and doing something and I don't answer the phone and I say, hey, I can't until tomorrow, do you know how often the problem's resolved by tomorrow? Pretty often. Right? I mean, we're here, like, that's the thing, right? We're here to help. But I'm just saying, a lot of the times there's that process of saying, hey, how do you remove friction, removing that friction to create that immediate relief and focus, because that's why you're saying yes, right? So what's the one habit? What's the one distraction that you maybe need to remove more from your schedule? What's the one energy leak? Something that is pulling energy out, and you're like, you're not going to get that energy back, right? What are those things that you need to say no to? Because the power of no is pretty cool. If you say no to enough things, then you have more time for those important things, right? So here's a hard question around this. How many of you are saying yes to so many things that your family is one of the smaller bars when they should be a bigger one? Right? How many of you are saying yes to things that aren't as important, which then means that you don't ever have fun? Yes, I brought that word up again. Right? Good friends. Good friends. I love it. But this is where you have to have that conscious thought of, what is on your calendar is that important part. What is your weekly rhythm? What's the important things that you're doing that are the important things, right? Because that's either A, what drives to make it so you can have the business that you're wanting, so you can have the life that you're wanting, right? We're here to create a life worth having, businesses worth owning, lives worth living, legacies worth leaving, right? So how are we building our schedule and saying no to the things that don't need to be on there in that way? Okay, the next one. So step 5. This is where, I'm a strong believer in growth and focusing on growing and being the best version of yourself. It's even the tagline on the MREA, right? It's not about becoming a millionaire. It's about becoming the best version of yourself, right? This is where number 5 is choose one skill to sharpen, right? What is something that if you improved on and you got 1% better would make a big difference? Tony Robbins says something similar of if you grow 10% on something, like then what are those things that you could take on like that would be different if you grew 10% from who you are today? Like if you're growing 10% from who you are right now, what other things could you tackle, do better, be that more efficient, have that much better of a life just by having some growth, right? So choose what that one skill is. So this is where it's, it's not a reinvention. I have to make sure to say that because this is not you coming through and saying, hey, great, I'm going to go to family reunion and say the 72 things that I need to improve on to get the business that I want, right? This is what's that one skill improved by 1%, and have it where you're practicing it weekly, right? This matters because small skills gains compound over time, right? Confidence grows through repetition. The more you do something, the more comfortable you are at it, the better you get at it, so on and so forth. So from the Atomic Habits, it talks a lot about like the habit loop, the improving by 1% and those kind of things. So I like this graph and the one I have right after of going through and having it so what's your cue on a habit, right? There's someone who goes through and to get himself in kind of a peak state, he's like every time for writing, he sits down and he has his nice dark like coffee that he's like, I never even drink the whole thing, but I sip it. And he's like, that for me is like my rhythm, my cue that gets me going into the right, situation. I'm not saying that's what you should do, but that's one that was kind of fascinating. What's that craving, response, reward? This is that building that habit around it. So when you go through and you do your lead generation, what are you doing and what's the reward you're giving yourself? Because you might not have, from calling the 10, 20 people that day, you might have not gotten your dopamine hit from calling those 10 people. I love how some of you laughed, right? But you might have been like, I got a listing appointment and I did this, right? Which is awesome. But what is that reward that you're giving yourself, even just something simple to make you excited to do it next time, right? But this is that part of building those habits. What's that one thing that you need to get better at? I like this one, building good habits. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. Like if one of your habits that you're wanting to build that would improve everything was, waking up and going to the gym. I know a lot of times one of the habits that people do with that is they get their clothes out or they get their clothes they're already in their clothes for the next morning, right? Because now it's one less step. They're making it easy. Breaking bad habits is the nice opposite. Make it invisible. Make it where it's unattractive. Make it hard to do, right? Make it unsatisfying. So a lot of times a habit that you're already in, you're doing because of past conditioning. So how do you help yourself get there making those movements? So you don't need a breakthrough. You need a bias towards small improvements. That's, a lot of times if you think about the Atomic Habit or all these different ones, they talk about that 1% growth over time, right?
Just talking about that, I had a goal it doesn't matter what my goal was. I had to start by walking for 5 minutes at a time to get back into the habit of getting to where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would take 4 5-minute walks in a day just to build up to a mile. And so that's kind of what he's talking about. Sometimes you don't have to get on the treadmill and run for a mile or go for a mile run. Maybe just 5 minutes of movement will get you towards your goal.
Totally. Right. You can definitely chunk things down. You can have it so that you're getting it where it's that small improvement. So what does that look like? And build that habit. Because it's not our goals that build the life we want. It's our habits that are going to build our life that we want. So what are those habits that we're choosing in order to get where we want? Right? Okay, number 6. Choose one relationship to deepen. One of my favorite questions that in the book, The 5 Types of Wealth, that he was saying, and if you listen to the podcast of that he's talking on and different things, he talks about his experience of living away from his family and how one of his friends or coaches asked him the question and did the math with him of, how many more times he was going to see his parents. Because he was basically the math. If you're thinking about, hey, I need to deepen a relationship with someone or something, his was he with his parents. He would, by the time they most likely passed, right, roughly 80 years old was the number that he was saying to plan on. He was only seeing them once a year because of the distance and what his job made him do. He was only going to see his dad 14 more times, which for him was one of those things where it's like, no, like my kids need us, that kind of thing. Having that thought process and being, so they actually quit the job, moved back to be with the family, got a new job for that reason, because that was a big enough of a relationship that he wanted in his life. And then he's like, I was able to change that number, right? Because I was able to change that in a drastic way where now my kids get to see my dad every single weekend, kind of a concept. And it changed from being right around that 15, 16 number to a lot, right? So the question with this one and why I feel this is important is because relationships are everything. Without relationships is where we're going to have a lot of issues. At the retreat, a lot of you will got to watch the little video with me about the Harvard study that's been going on for like years. And it goes through and talks about how even through all this study, it's like 80 something plus years, all of these people they studied, the one factor that was the biggest takeaway was how your relationships and having good relationships makes you live longer, more happy, and everything, basically, in that way. That was the determining factor over everything else. So when you look at it and say, great, what are the strong relationships or the relationships that you want to strengthen? What are those, strong connections that can create that meaning, that sustaining aspect in your life? Is it a partner, a client, a mentor, a referral person, a teammate, someone that you can strengthen that relationship with that, will help in that way? Because, growth without connection leads to burnout. That's one of the reasons why being in a powerful room, like with you guys, being around people who are producers, being around that group and having connections helps you make it that much farther. One stronger relationship can change a lot for you this year, right? So here's some simple relationship perspectives that I really like. So one, it says, the minute you measure a relationship, it's a transaction. It's no longer about love. 2, the quality of my life depends on the quality of my relationships. 3, the quality of my business depends on the quality of my relations. 4, we don't experience relationships. We experience the relationships we focus on. 5, whatever you magnify in a relationship, problems or appreciation, becomes the emotional tone of that relationship. And the next part is what you appreciate appreciates. So the reason why this is an important one, and I have it on here, is number 6 to really start your year off right, is what is that relationship that you need to put some more time into, some more appreciation into, some more attention, right? Attention is the greatest form of love that will make the difference for you in your life. Okay, 7. So make a 90-day commitment. I know a lot of you, I've just did the whole year planning. We did it where it's like, hey, great, what are we doing for this whole year? Now the thing is, now you need to take this into something that's more bite-sized. So if you have something that you're wanting to shoot for, if you're having your goal of how much money you want to make, if you're having something in that way, that form or fashion, now you need to take it down into what is the 90-day commitment, right? That you are going to boil it down to have that improvement in a shorter time. Because who in here has ever procrastinated? None of your hands went up. That's great. I'm kidding. No. Right? You all procrastinated putting your hand up. The reality is, right, like having it where we can be in that spot, we can be in that mindset of growth, shrinking it down gives you the ability to be able to have a better time frame on it, have something that you can hold yourself accountable to. So what's your one goal for the next 90 days? What's the one behavior you'll track weekly? Having it so you're doing it that way. You know, what's the reward if you follow through, right? Having it so maybe you're dangling a carrot, or maybe, man, what did I had to one time with one of my MAPS coaches write $1,000 check to somebody that I didn't want to give it to, and I had to give it to him if I failed. Right? That's not a very fun way to make sure to hold yourself accountable, but it worked. I did it. I did not want to give them that check. Right? No, I didn't want that person to know that I was going to give it to him. Right? Yeah, I love it. So, but that's like, and I did that with my wife once, which I don't know if I recommend that, but I basically said, you either spend this $500 on new clothes, or I'm going to go donate it to whatever she didn't like. And she really didn't like that. So she went and spent the $500. So it was great. So, but ultimately, what are those things, right? And I want you to think in seasons, right? Think in smaller time blocks in order to help you get to where you're wanting. Because the reality is, right, the longer time frame you think on something that you need to do habit-wise, you're gonna most likely procrastinate. So think in smaller seasons that way with your long-term goal. I want you guys to think of what you want your life to look like in 5 years. I want you to look at what it's going to take in 10, right? Where you want in 10. The thing is, one of those quotes from Gary Keller and a lot of other people, like I don't even know where it started because it's just one of those ones, but it's basically you drastically overestimate what you can do in 1 year, and you drastically underestimate what you can do in 5. So what are those things? What are you wanting to do? What tools are you holding yourself accountable to make in that way? I personally still love the 411. I know that's a tool that I've talked about many times with you guys. We have that on our hot links for you guys to go to if that's something you want to grab. But how are you holding yourself accountable to what these goals are, what this time block is, where you're at? And those are the 7 things. So momentum doesn't come from intensity, right? It comes from alignment and repetition. One of my favorite, and this actually was really reinforced yesterday by one of our own, Jesse. He was chatting with a bunch of the new agents. He compared the intensity to, starting a engine of a train. He's like, if you go and now you really quickly push on a train, you're going to get nowhere. But if you over time keep on pushing it and adding that weight behind it to get it going is where it gets to have so much momentum that it won't stop. So, okay, I want to hear some